Hello everyone, Ace here, and today let's talk about Grand Theft Auto 6 and the recent controversies surrounding it, of which there are a few. The first and most notable is, of course, the pricing for this game. Now, there is a lot to be said about that, but to start off, the base version of the game, which is to say the shell version of the game, is going to be priced at $80, while the so-called ultimate version of the game, which is to say the actual full game, is priced at $100. Now, for what it's worth, the complete edition of the game, the $100 price tag, is itself not out of line as far as AAA releases are concerned. In fact, I can point to games that get $120 price tags for the full experience. To be clear, I'm not a fan of that pricing model for the AAA slop that we tend to receive. To be brutally honest, even the price for the glorified demos that are often the base or shell versions of the game is still in excess of what is actually warranted in terms of value, which is to say that AAA studios aren't known for making crap games these days that are not worth the money that they're asking for. Yet what is happening with Grand Theft Auto 6 has caused additional ire in its own right, and I believe that it is important to look at additional context rather than just the mere on the paper numbers to fully appreciate why gamers are upset by this situation. For a start, let's talk about the base version of the game, the shell version of the game, which is priced at $80. This is, let's be honest, a blatant attempt to try to normalize and make $80 the standard, much like how $70 is the standard now for the base shell version of the game, and how $60 before it used to be the standard, and how $50 used to be the standard back when you actually got the full experience. The problem here is, of course, that Rockstar is trying to get away with pricing the game in such a way. And if the game ends up being a success, that would be Rockstar proving that they can get away with making an $80 demo, and that other AAA studios who champion themselves as being the true elite of the industry should follow suit. And to be honest, the only way to stop this is to not buy Grand Theft Auto 6 at the base $80 asking price or even at the full $100 asking price. Wait for it to go on sale, which it will. The problem here is that Rockstar is betting on enough people just putting up with the $80 asking price for the base demo version of the game that they'll accept it, and it'll be a success. And to be honest, the sad part is they might actually be correct in that assessment. There's a very real reason to believe that there's enough people out there willing to doll out the extra money to make this game a success, just because they want to play it when it first comes out and aren't patient enough to wait until it actually goes on sale. Consequences for their rash decision be damned, so says they. Yet, let's be honest, Rockstar is going to try to make this game be the best damn game possible as a means of sweetening the honeypot. It's a lot harder to justify not buying a fantastic game, even temporarily, than it is to justify not buying a bad game, or even a mediocre game. Now, this does rest upon the assumption that Rockstar hasn't been overly captured by ideology and poor hiring practices for long enough to completely stymie their ability to make good games, the way that so many other major AAA companies have been absolutely ruined these past few years. For what it's worth, there is always the possibility that the disaster that was the definitive editions might actually be the start of a trend rather than a fluke. It is possible that Rockstar might actually put out a very mediocre game. They are ultimately, however, as part of their strategy, banking on this game being so fantastic, or at least so hyped up, that people will overlook the pricing decisions behind it. Speaking of which, while we have talked about the base price or the demo price of the game, I believe now is a good time to discuss the Ultimate Edition of the game and why the actual full version of the game is also causing ire. Now, I have been very outspoken numerous times, including during this very video, of why I'm not a fan of the current pricing model for AAA games, and how the Ultimate Editions are the actual full versions of those games. Now you might think that the full version of GTA 6 costing quote-unquote only $100 and thus is cheaper than the $120 asking price of some other full versions of other games means that it isn't as deserving of scrutiny as other full versions of other games. But to understand what's going on, we have to look deeper. In the case of most other AAA games, the Ultimate Edition is usually a little bit more subtle about how it's the actual full version of the game rather than the shell demo version of the game. One of the more popular ways that this comes into effect is the inclusion of the upcoming expansion packs, which, let's be honest, are content that was always supposed to be in the game, but was deliberately cut out in order for it to be resold to you piecemeal in order to milk you of more money. You can also look at XP boosts that exist to encourage you to buy the Ultimate Edition in order to at least partially avoid the agonizing grind that is deliberately put in and meant to be made less fun just to milk you of even more money via microtransactions. These are still slimy, but like I said, technically more subtle than what Rockstar has done. Some of these so-called bonuses in the Ultimate Edition include things like being able to modify the signature pickup truck used by one of the playable characters. In other words, if you don't have the Ultimate Edition, you're not able to modify it. It's an entire game mechanic that is denied to people that bought the demo version of the game. There's also stores that specialize in various cosmetic options for the characters that simply won't be available either if you don't pick up the Ultimate version of the game. And no, this is not expansion packs for down the road. This is day one. And yes, I do know that day one DLC has been a thing for a long time. Yet here, the sheer amount of things that have been ripped out of the base game in order to sell back to you is to the excess. It may not be quite the worst example in the history of video games, but once we understand the context, it is easy to see why people are upset. And doubly so when you have game journalists running around claiming that it's a good thing, actually, to charge players more, and that Rockstar is doing everyone a favor, and that they honestly should be charging people $100 for the base version. Yes, game journalists are out there championing the idea of making $100 the standard. And like I said, this is not the only controversy that has been recently revealed. There's also the fact that the physical copies of the game aren't actually physical. You're buying a box with a code in it, not an actual disc. It is digital in all meaningful ways. And the people in charge of making this decision, when they tried to trick people into believing that the physical copy is in fact an actual thing and is a physical copy, well, it's not difficult to see why people are accusing them of attempting to deceive everyone. You could quite reasonably call the physical copy of GTA 6 a scam. It's to the point that there are even a few retailers that are refusing to sell the physical version of the game. Now yes, it's nothing new for GTA games to not be sold by certain retailers or something along those lines. In fact, GTA has been known to be banned from entire countries from time to time. That alone is in of itself not what makes this situation out of the ordinary. What does make it out of the ordinary is why this is being refused to be sold, because the quote physical copy unquote can reasonably be described as a scam. Even more of a scam than, charging $80 for a glorified demo.